Revealed, how a little girl's touching plea to the CEO transformed 1 million lives this Christmas. Emily Sullivan sat cross-legged on the worn carpet of the local homeless shelter, her heart swaying between admiration and anxiety. The stories shared by the residents echoed in her mind tales of hardship and flickers of tenacity that stirred something deep within her. She had always grown up with the understanding that life could be both harsh and kind, especially as she watched her mother work late into the night, her face weary yet joyful. Today, Emily wasn't just another volunteer, she was a witness to the raw reality of those she called neighbors. But with every heartfelt confession that wrapped around her like a warm blanket, an unsettling thought crept into her mind. What would happen if this shelter, this safe haven for so many, was threatened? The whispers of corporate funding cuts had begun to swirl around town, and Emily felt caught in a tempest of worry and determination. How could she make an impact in a world that often felt so desensitized to suffering? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The thought of reaching out to the CEO, a man she admired greatly, sent her heart racing, but beneath the confidence lurked a storm of self-doubt. What if he didn't care about a letter from a 12-year-old girl? What if her words were merely an echo in an empty room? The very core of her resolve wavered. She picked up her pen, the ink poised over the blank paper, and hesitated. Words swirled in her mind like snowflakes caught in the wind, beautiful yet chaotic. How could she adequately express the slice of humanity she had seen? With trembling hands, she started scribbling, the pressure mounting with every stroke. What if her plea fell on deaf ears? The mere thought twisted her stomach into knots. The potential for hope weighed heavily against the risks of failure, each line she wrote burning like hot coals. The shelter's future crept closer in her thoughts, and as she painted the pictures of each resident's dreams which mirrored her own struggles, it felt as if she was sending a piece of herself into a dark unknown. But just as she wrapped up her letter with a fierce declaration, a sudden news flash rattled her heart. The CEO had plans to visit town. Excitement and terror surged through her veins. Was this a sign? Could her small voice resonate in a room filled with powerful figures? Yet the gnawing fear returned, whispering that this might just be another fleeting moment. What if his heart was busy elsewhere? What if he was only another cog in the machine, unable to truly affect change? Tension coiled tightly around her, squeezing every last ounce of resolve. She knew she had to take that step, dive headfirst into the fray, elevate her voice even with the cacophony all around. But what if she became just another shadow, lost in the noise? Her head dropped, breaths coming short. The air tinged with desperation hung like fog, blurring the way forward. As the meeting drew near and the weight of possibility amplified, Emily stood at the threshold of decision, shaking in the grip of uncertainty. This moment could either pull her from the depths of despair leading to light or sweep her into obscurity, a footnote in an overwhelming narrative. What lay ahead felt like an avalanche ready to engulf her, and she had to wonder, could her earnest plea stand against the tides of a corporate world, or was she destined to be silenced when the hour of reckoning struck? Emily paced the narrow corridor of the shelter, each step echoing her growing apprehension. The day of the CEO's visit loomed closer, and anticipation blended with dread, swirling like a tempest within her. She could envision the scene, polished shoes clicking against cold tile, confident voices mingling with the warmth of the shelter's heart. Would anyone truly listen? At school the next day, she found it hard to concentrate. Her math problems faded into the background as her thoughts flickered back to the residents' faces that lit up as they shared dreams and fears. Each story had become a thread in the fabric of her resolve. Yet the nagging thought of inadequacy lingered, whispering insidiously, "You are just a girl. What can you possibly change?" That night, Emily lay in bed, the phrase "just a girl" spinning relentlessly in her mind. She realized that deep down, she held something powerful, the ability to evoke empathy. Instead of viewing herself as small in a big world, She could be the spark that ignited change. Connecting with others through their stories was her strength. What if she built on that? With renewed focus, she crafted a plan. She would not only write to the CEO but also gather more voices. If her words could resonate, perhaps she could help other residents share their truths, too. Emily envisioned a small assembly at the shelter, inviting the community to come together and share their personal stories, each narrative a tribute to the resilience of the human spirit. As she pitched the idea to the shelter's coordinator, her voice trembled with passion. We can show him what this place means. These stories matter. They need to be heard. The coordinator's raised eyebrows suggested surprise, but she nodded thoughtfully, clearly moved by Emily's resolve. The following days became a whirlwind of planning. Emily enlisted the help of her classmates' friends who eagerly joined her cause. Together, they printed flyers, spread the word, and encouraged residents to come forward with their experiences. She was amazed by the outpouring of solidarity. However, with excitement came mounting pressure. What if the day arrived, and no one spoke? What if her peers wavered before the spotlight? While doubt threatened to drown her enthusiasm, each confident voice who agreed to participate fortified her conviction. They rehearsed their stories, each moment transforming their apprehension into empowerment. On the day of the event, Emily stood by the entrance, her heart pounding. She had carefully arranged chairs in a semicircle, thinking of it as a nurturing space where vulnerability could flourish. The first faces began to filter in smiles clashing with stray signs of hardship, cautious eyes filled with expectation. As the room filled, Emily took a deep breath, her uncertainty eclipsed by purpose. To her surprise, when the time came, it was her own voice that quivered, a blend of nervousness and determination. Today, we are not just voices, we are stories, a part of something bigger. And together, we can reach someone who might care. As stories unfolded one by one, the atmosphere shifted. The narratives were visceral, raw, and resonate. Emily witnessed compassion bloom in the eyes of an audience that had come to listen. It felt as if the weight of the world lifted, and she was filled with an exhilarating sense of unity. But just as the last story was shared, the dim lighting flickered, and an unexpected message pinged across Emily's phone. The CEO had arrived early. The moment of truth was upon her. A rush of clarity coursed through Emily. They had come so far, and she must face this head-on. As she stepped across the room towards the door, her heart thumped in synchrony with her frayed nerves. This was it, the culmination of her efforts was right there, both terrifying and thrilling. What awaited her beyond the threshold? Would she genuinely be able to draw him in, to make him see? The moment had come to face the possibility of changing not just lives, but also the perceptions that lay behind decision-making. Something in her began to crystallize. She had a story too, and it was her turn to share. As Emily approached the door, a wave of uncertainty washed over her. She paused just a moment, gripped by conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to run back into the warmth of the gathering, the stories still echoing, while another part pressed forward, urging her to confront the looming figure outside. This wasn't just about her voice anymore, it was about everyone who had dared to share. Swallowing hard, she stepped outside to find the CEO, a sharply dressed man with an air of authority that hovered around him like an invisible shield. He stood there, glancing at the assembled crowd, his expression inscrutable. It was evident he had arrived prepared to assess, not to engage. Emily took a tentative breath, feeling the weight of her own resolve fortifying her. Excuse me, Mr. Harrington, she called out, her voice shaking despite her efforts. He turned, eyebrows raised, clearly surprised to be addressed by such a young girl. She felt her heart race but also noticed how his posture softened slightly as he focused on her. I wanted to welcome you to the shelter and share something important with you, she stammered, her thoughts racing. We've gathered stories, real stories from the people who live here. They matter. They deserve to be heard. His eyes narrowed, assessing. Stories? You think mere stories can change anything? He adjusted his tie, reflecting the apprehension and skepticism she had expected. They can, she answered, finding strength in her own belief. These aren't just stories, their lives. Each resident here has faced things I can't imagine, and they've been brave enough to share. What if I told you that sharing these stories could change perceptions, help create better conditions, or even drive decisions that save lives? The words spilled out, fueled by her newly uncovered passion. A flicker of interest crossed his face, but the skepticism remained. You really think I could be swayed by a bunch of anecdotes? Not just anecdotes, real experiences, she replied fiercely. You could bring real change simply by listening. It's not about convincing you with grand ideals. It's about understanding the individual stories behind poverty and hope. Silence hung between them, heavy with the weight of her conviction. Then, she turned on her heel, glancing back at the warm glow of the shelter. I understand if you don't believe me right away. But once you hear, you won't be able to ignore them. You'll see that every individual story adds to a greater understanding of this place and the people who call it home. In that moment, she felt the stakes shift. This wasn't merely an appeal, it was a challenge, and she could see the hesitation in his eyes. A flicker of calculation unfolded on his face. Perhaps he had arrived expecting to engage with numbers and strategies, but here was an opportunity to connect with humanity instead. Let us hear this, he said finally, exhibiting a willingness that surprised her. I'll give it 10 minutes. Emily felt a rush of triumph, but it was quickly mingled with trepidation. She led him back inside, her heart pounding not just from the encounter but from the realization that today might change everything. As they entered, her voice steadied, fueled by her responsibility to those who had shared their truths. The gathered residents watched curiously as she resumed her position at the front. She knew this was about to shift, one small voice echoing for many. But as she stood there, the weight of what came next rested heavily on her. What if the stories didn't resonate? What if her moment of courage unspooled in the face of scrutiny? Silence filled the room like a storm, but she steeled herself, staring into the eyes of her peers, each face ready to witness this critical juncture. Emily spoke, her voice filling the space, weaving together threads of hope and resilience. But at the back of her mind, a new thought flickered. What if Mr. Harrington's 10 minutes stretched into something deeper? As he began to take notes and the stories unfolded, would he realize that each narrative had the potential to alter the very foundation by which lives were judged, making her plea resonate beyond walls into a realm of reality that demanded change? The moment of vulnerability danced at the precipice of deep impact, her courage igniting a flame of reciprocity. But one thought lingered as she lost herself in the cascade of stories. Would it be enough to truly reach him, to transcend the limits of perception and pull on the heartstrings of a hardened executive? As the last story ended, Emily looked back at Mr. Harrington, her heart in her throat. Had she successfully opened the door to possibility, or had she simply entered another battlefield? The tension in the air was palpable, yet the outcome lay just beyond the horizon of their interaction. And then, as the room erupted in quiet applause, her phone buzzed again, a new message: we need to talk. What would be the outcome of this encounter? Would they take the next step together toward real change? The applause reverberated around Emily like an electric current, but the noise faded into the background as she focused on Mr. Harrington's expression. His scribbled notes encased his intent like a taut spring, waiting to be released. An environment she had crafted with her conviction seemed to swell with significance, but sobering thoughts intruded. Had she done enough to shift his perspective? As the residents dispersed, she caught snippets of grateful whispers and encouraging looks, but her mind began to drift back to the gnawing question: what if he dismissed her attempts, tucked them aside as mere sentiments? The vibrant stories they had shared could easily dissolve in the corporate machinery, a casualty of cold calculations. Remarkable, Mr. Harrington finally said, breaking through her thoughts. The admiration in his voice surprised her. Your passion is palpable. A swell of hope sparked within her, but she remained reflective. I appreciate that, but words alone won't create change. What are you willing to consider? He leaned back, assessing her. You handle this space with an unexpected maturity, Emily. But business decisions are rarely emotional. Can narratives affect the bottom line? To truly understand, you must listen beyond profit margins, she insisted, feeling a tension rise in her chest. Her courage was becoming a double-edged sword, bold in her resolve but vulnerable to scrutiny. What if you opened your mind to not just numbers, but the human element behind them? The CEO remained silent for a beat too long, the air thickening. In that moment, Emily grappled with her own apprehensions. What if she had miscalculated? The vulnerability she showcased could be interpreted as naivete in the face of stark reality. Perhaps, he finally conceded, but it remains complicated. The bureaucracy in our organization complicated doesn't mean impossible. She couldn't believe how her voice carried a resonance she didn't know she possessed. You said you'd give it 10 minutes. You've now listened to stories of resilience, faced struggles. We're tangible proof of the impact you can have. You control the narrative beyond the spreadsheets. He leaned forward, a glimmer dancing in his eye. Curiosity or challenge? And how do I convince my board? They thrive on data, not anecdotes. Show them the stories. This isn't just about understanding, it's a call for structural change. Use the stories to frame statistics, they amplify the mission, Emily argued, feeling threads of strategy weave into her thinking as she spoke. Had she just stumbled upon a hidden competence? The notion prevailed she was more than a mere voice, she could mold the narrative that could lead to real outcomes. Confidence surged. Let me organize a presentation, she continued, her mind racing as ideas tumbled forth. Integrate these stories into your next board meeting, share visuals, encapsulate the experiences. People need context, empathy needs a voice. Mr. Harrington's expression shifted from skepticism to consideration. You realize this is a pivotal step. It's no longer a simple conversation, this is about institutional commitment. I know, Emily nodded, urgency knitting her brow. And it's not just a personal stake, it's a chance for our community. This isn't just about helping others, it's building a legacy that counts people, not just numbers. He studied her for a moment, and the air crackled with intent as Emily realized this could, indeed, be the turning point she had hoped for. But then, doubt crept in. Was she prepared for the scrutiny of his board? Would they even entertain her ideas, or would they drown her out with their agendas? As Mr. Harrington raised an eyebrow, the weight of his gaze held layers of consequence. This is uncharted territory. If we take this path, it will require a level of commitment on your part. Are you ready for that? More ready than I've ever been, she asserted, her heart racing with determination. The stakes couldn't be higher, but clarity emerged from within her, illuminating paths she never considered. As they spoke further about details and logistics, a sudden rush of responsiveness enveloped Emily's thoughts. She was stepping into a realm fraught with challenges, but perhaps she had discovered her true calling, not just a voice, but a catalyst for change. Just then, her phone buzzed once more, displaying an unfamiliar name. We need to strategize. Tomorrow. With every layer of complexity added to her journey, Emily understood the path ahead wasn't just a straightforward mission. She was about to grapple with influential players and navigate obstacles that could either enhance or jeopardize her vision. But deep down, a conviction resonated. She had embarked on something transformative, a journey she would not retreat from. What kind of obstacles awaited her now? Would she conquer the negotiations ahead, or would the challenges consume her resolve? The sun cast long shadows as Emily stepped onto the polished marble floor of the corporate headquarters the next morning. The buzz of conversation filled the air, yet it felt oddly distant from her thoughts. She was entrapped in a mental whirlwind, the outcomes of the board meeting looming larger than life. In her mind, she replayed Mr. Harrington's question, the weight of it pressing down like a thick fog. Are you ready for that? The answer felt elusive, hovering just out of reach. She had expressed her conviction, but now the reality of that commitment threatened to unravel her courage. Emily paused outside the boardroom, stealing a moment to gather herself. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the faces that had shared their stories with her, their pain, resilience, and dreams. Those narratives deserved a voice, and she was their ambassador. But what if she faltered? What if her resolve wavered under the scrutinizing eyes of a dozen executives? A steeliness settled within her as she entered. The boardroom lights were almost blinding, illuminating the faces of committee members who were seated around an imposing, oval table. Mr. Harrington motioned for her to join him at the front, his expression a mixture of expectation and uncertainty. As she took her place, an unsettling mixture of energy surged through her, a flutter of excitement intertwined with the weight of dread. Thank you all for allowing this presentation. Today, I hope to show you how we can transform lives not just with numbers, but by understanding the very essence of our work. The board members exchanged guarded glances, skepticism clinging to the air like smoke. A tall man with wires around his glasses tapped his pen against a notepad, raising his eyebrows in mild reproach. Let us be clear, Emily. We're all for innovation, but we measure success in profits. Can your ideas translate to real figures? A surge of indignation ignited in her. It's precisely the stories, the human experience behind those figures, that can ignite passion among your consumers. People remember stories. They remember connection, she declared, her voice steady but infused with urgency. Her heart raced as she sensed curiosity begin to pierce the collective doubt. Mr. Harrington intervened. Let us hear what you've put together. With a nod, Emily launched into her presentation, showcasing graphs that depicted meaningful impacts alongside testimonials that painted vivid pictures of resilience and transformation. Each slide reverberated with a palpable narrative, descriptions of hope woven within the fabric of numbers. Yet, as she progressed, she found herself confronted by the skepticism of the board, particularly from the man whose frown deepened with each story she shared. He challenged her assertions, dissecting her ideas into quantifiable components in an attempt to diminish the emotional weight she had worked to convey. Her mind raced. Should she retaliate? Concede? What would be the cost of her earnestness in this stark business landscape? Despite the tension pressing in around her, she grasped onto the conviction from the previous day, the knowledge that she possessed something valuable. These narratives were not only meaningful, they were potentially transformative. But first, she needed to navigate this labyrinth and emerge unscathed. As her presentation concluded, an uneasy silence hung in the air. She peered into the faces of the board members, looking for signs of approval or resistance. Finally, the skeptical man leaned back, crossing his arms. You bring passion, Emily, but this board likely expects more than just a rousing story. The corners of her mouth twitched with determination. You want data, I can deliver the figures, but they must be coupled with understanding. Let us quantify the impact of what these stories can lead to. We can build a strategy that marries empathy with analytics. Mr. Harrington's eyes flared with interest. Was this the pivotal moment where her pleading would shift from idealistic rhetoric to actionable insights? Then, as Emily stood there, she realized the most daunting revelation. It wasn't merely about securing approval or encountering resistance. It was about courageously standing for what she believed, a commitment to humanizing the corporate narrative. But with their probing questions still echoing in her mind, Emily sensed an imminent clash approaching. This wouldn't end with a single presentation. This was just the beginning of a battle between emotion and cold pragmatism. What would she do when the board's decision threatened to derail her vision? Would she bend under their pressure, or would she stand firm in her resolve to create a legacy that mattered? The stakes had never been higher. Her next move could alter not just her career, but the lives intertwined with her mission. The boardroom remained overwhelmingly silent, a tension-filled pause hanging like a thick fog. It was as if the air had solidified around Emily, each second stretching longer and deeper. She could feel the weight of their collective gaze, questioning and calculating, pressing against her like an unseen force. Gathering her thoughts, she began to mentally prepare a strategy. They demanded figures, but her observations were tethered to the relentless ebb and flow of the human experience. I can create a follow-up report with precise data, but the qualitative impact is crucial to grasping the breadth of our outreach. This isn't just about dollars, it's about lives. Let me prove it to you, she said, conscious of the eagerness edging into her tone. The skeptical man shifted in his chair, contemplation flickering in his eyes. Emily recognized this was her chance to seize the narrative. Consider the potential return on investment, not just in profit margins but in brand loyalty and market expansion. If we formulate our strategy around the ethos of our mission, she emphasized, allowing her own conviction to radiate through her words, we will cultivate deeper connections. Mr. Harrington nodded thoughtfully, seemingly intrigued by her shift in focus. How soon can we see the data you promise? We need a compelling argument to take to our stakeholders. It was a small victory, perhaps, but Emily felt the first cracks of resistance begin to soften. I'll work on it and have preliminary insights by the end of the week, Emily responded, her voice firm. The resolve within her grew. This was merely a doorway opening wider. She realized she needed to turn her attention toward building alliances within the company, drawing on supporters who shared her vision. As the meeting adjourned, Emily felt a mix of relief and vulnerability. While interest had sparked, the looming specter of skepticism remained. Leaving the boardroom, she glanced back at Mr. Harrington, who exchanged a few quiet words with the doubtful man, still frowning, tracking her departure. The rest of the day moved like a haze. As she sat at her desk, the fluorescent lights buzzed around her, punctuated only by occasional footsteps and conversations from colleagues. However, Emily's thoughts raced. With each second ticking away, an urgency ignited within her. Planning her next move was not merely desirable, it was imperative. She opened her laptop and began crafting a follow-up plan. This time, she would not only focus on data for the board but on real-life stories that tied her mission to an overarching narrative. Emily envisioned integrating compelling visuals with real outcomes from the field. No longer would she solely defend her perspective. She would construct a framework that underscored the correlation between emotional narratives and financial success. However, a gnawing worry lingered. What if those narratives were dismissed once more? What if they sought only to blend her insights into their conventional frameworks, stripping them of their essence? The idea troubled her, yet it also fueled her desire to double down on her beliefs, to embrace the dichotomy of creativity and analytics. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue through her office window, she realized the culmination of her day was not an end, it was a beginning. She needed allies. The next day, she organized a lunch meeting with a few trusted colleagues from marketing and finance, individuals known for fostering innovation within their ranks. While she knew she couldn't sway the entire board alone, she could ignite passion within those supportive of her vision, creating a coalition that harmonized sentiment and data. With every bite of her salad, Emily constructed her narrative in her mind, rehearsing the case she would make. But even amidst preparation, an unsettling thought crept in: if too few joined her, or if they couldn't see the greater purpose behind her passion, what would remain of her initiative? The time had come for Emily not just to present ideas but to embody them, standing at the precipice of personal and professional transformation. Would she find the allies she so desperately needed? And would their combined voices resonate loudly enough to break through the corporate noise she faced? Determined, she took her phone to schedule the meeting, but trepidation held her hand above the screen. What if this step led to a confrontation she wasn't ready for? What if the passions she ignited ultimately succumbed to the cynicism of corporate culture? The next steps loomed ahead, uncertain and rife with potential failure, compelling her toward deeper introspection on what it meant to lead with purpose in a world laden with skepticism. Emily awoke the next morning feeling a potent mix of anticipation and dread. The meeting with her colleagues loomed large in her mind, as if it were not just a gathering of professional minds, but a crucible that would shape her future. She spent extra moments in front of the mirror, silently rehearsing key points, her reflection blurring with uncertainty. What if they criticized her ideas instead of rallying around them? Arriving at the cafe, she scanned the room. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with soft chatter, but all she could focus on was her mission. Each familiar face that smiled in greeting felt like a potential ally, yet also a reminder of the risks ahead. She silently assessed her colleagues: Mark, the pragmatic finance guru; Sarah, the creative marketing whiz; and Tom, whose empathetic approach often stood at odds with cutthroat corporate norms. Emily. Sarah waved as she approached the table, bringing a sense of familiarity. Emily took a deep breath, forcing her internal turmoil aside as they settled around the table, menu screens blinking in front of them, a temporary shield against the weighty discussions that awaited. As they ordered, Emily mentally outlined her narrative structure, focusing on the human stories she wanted to weave together, desperately hoping to ignite their empathy and interest. The urgency pulsed in her veins. She needed them to see the vision, a catalyst for genuine change. "Thanks for joining me today," Emily began, voice steady despite the stirrings of doubt. I wanted to share some ideas about our upcoming project. I truly believe we can make a significant impact beyond just profit margins. Interest glimmered in Mark's eyes, but a flicker of skepticism from Tom sent a shiver up her spine. He'd always been known for his tough questions and relentless pragmatism. How do you plan to convince the board that gut feelings and personal stories can drive revenue? He challenged. That's precisely the point, she replied, leaning in as if to share a secret. Empathy drives consumer loyalty. Brands that resonate with values over spreadsheets foster deeper connections. We're not just selling products, we're selling a story that people can believe in. Sarah nodded, her fingers drumming on the table in encouragement. We need compelling examples. Do we have real-life impacts that support this? Emily's heart raced. Exactly. I have illustrations from our initiatives. For instance, the work we did last quarter, how we turned lives around through education and empowerment. Imagine if we presented that alongside our financial data. We can show them that we're not just making numbers work, we're impacting lives. The room fell silent momentarily, and Emily's mind raced with possibilities. But, she continued, this needs all of us. If we unite our insights, strategize with both sentiment and analytics, we can create a persuasive narrative that resonates with the board and stakeholders alike. Yet, as she watched Tom's skeptical expression, she felt her defenses momentarily falter. What if they didn't buy into her vision? What if she lacked the capacity to inspire these seasoned professionals? The possible failure loomed with an urgency that tightened her chest. I appreciate your enthusiasm, Tom said slowly, his tone measured. But if we're basing our strategy on emotional appeals, we must ensure that they're backed by solid data. Otherwise, we'll be walking a tightrope, and one misstep could mean disaster. Emily hesitated. He was right, and she knew the weight of that tightrope. Let's say we combine both, we provide the narratives and the statistics. It's a foundation we can build on. If we want the board to engage, we need to speak both languages. Fair enough, Mark injected with a nod. We can create something with substance. When do we start? The prospect of collaboration sent a thrill through her as ideas began bouncing around the table. Yet a darker question intruded at the edges of her mind. What if the board still rejected their unified vision? How would she stand up to that kind of corporate dismissal? What would that say about her capability as a leader? They spent the rest of the lunch strategizing, weaving together scraps of ideas into a tapestry of possibilities threaded with emotional resonance. As they concluded, Emily felt a fragile yet powerful hope stirring within her. Perhaps she could harness this support to evolve not just their project but her own professional identity. However, deep down, she faced the unsettling truth. She had to confront Mr. Harrington and the doubters squarely. The boardroom awaited her again, and with it, the potential for validation or defeat. Determined yet anxious, she left the cafe, questioning her readiness as she glanced at the time. The day of reckoning approached, and for the first time, she began to realize that it wouldn't just be about numbers, but about herself, her resolve, her beliefs, her journey. The air grew thick with anticipation. What awaited her in the boardroom this time? Would it lead to a hard-won acceptance or an unexpected setback? As Emily stepped into the boardroom, the ambience felt charged, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The polished table stretched before her, a landscape where decisions would be made with strokes of pens and the weight of authority. She took a moment to steady her racing heart, her mind replaying the discussions from the cafe. Collaboration had ignited some confidence, but now she stood at the precipice of a defining moment. Mr. Harrington, the CEO, entered with an air of nonchalance that belied his power. He surveyed the room, his eyes sharpening as they landed on Emily. "Let us get started," he said, settling into his seat. She could feel the intensity of his gaze, a silent invitation for her to reveal her vision. With a wave of adrenaline, Emily rose. "Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I appreciate the efforts from our last discussion." As her gaze swept across the faces of her colleagues, she noticed Tom's unwavering scrutiny, a reminder of the critical balance she needed to strike. I believe that focusing on how we impact lives can not only create strong connections with consumers but also lead to sustained growth. She launched into her presentation, weaving statistics with anecdotes, the stories of individuals and communities that had transformed thanks to the company's initiatives. Each slide felt like a heartbeat, each narrative a thread connecting human experience to corporate purpose. Emily could see some initial nods from her colleagues, but Mr. Harrington's face remained impassive, a mask that both encouraged and troubled her. Interesting framing, he interjected suddenly, eyebrows arched. But are we really ready to throw intuition into the boardroom conversation? This isn't a charity gig, it's business. Her heart sank momentarily, the sting of his words resonating. She could feel the familiar swell of doubt creeping in, threatening to undermine her resolve. Still, her meetings with Sarah, Mark, and even Tom echoed in her mind, a reassurance that she had support. No longer merely a voice, she was part of a collective effort. Mr. Harrington, I understand the significance of data, she replied, her voice steadier now. That's why we're gathering quantitative metrics alongside heartfelt narratives. We believe that the emotional appeal backed by solid data can drive not just intent but action. She pointed to the charts outlining anticipated ROI based on customer engagement metrics derived from emotional storytelling. Yet she needed to delve deeper, to confront not just the company's bottom line but also its culture. If we frame our strategy to show how our commitment can unify our employees' goals with the consumers we want to reach, we can redefine our brand's impact, she continued, daring to meet his gaze squarely. Again, silence hung in the air, thick with skepticism. Mr. Harrington leaned back in his chair, observing her like a hawk sizing up its prey. Compelling theory, but what if it doesn't resonate? What's your contingency plan? Caught off guard, she felt her mind racing to find a way to express the risk without diminishing her vision. If we introduce flexible metrics to gauge responses and adapt our approach as feedback comes in, we can craft a narrative that feels authentic and relevant as it evolves. We're not just looking for a one-off campaign. This is a chance for long-term engagement. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Emily's heart thundered in her chest, her belief in her ideas clashing with the weight of doubt that clouded her judgment. Could her narrative hold up under scrutiny? Did she possess the resolve to pivot in real time and still maintain credibility? Just as the tension reached a fever pitch, Tom spoke up, breaking through the uncertainty hanging thick in the air. I'm intrigued. But we need clear metrics to accompany the emotional aspect. Let us draft an initial framework while we flesh out the narratives. Gratitude washed over Emily, his support igniting a flicker of hope within her. Yet, the questions hung heavily in the air. Did this mean they were truly moving forward, or was this merely an attempt to placate her? As they began discussing specifics, Emily left part of herself behind in the room. Her worries and fears floated just outside the door. But another part of her remained anchored, embedded in determination. She understood then that navigating this corporate landscape meant not just selling her ideas but continuously evolving her identity within it. What awaited Emily was both exhilarating and terrifying. The board's acceptance was still a distant dream, the reality of opposition lingering on the horizon. With each passing moment, she sensed that true confrontation lay at the edge. The breaths she took now were preparing her for an inevitable clash with the doubt that loomed larger than the room itself. The question remained, what would happen when she faced not only the board but the doubt within her core? Would she be able to transform her vision into action, or would she unravel in their scrutiny? Emily returned to her desk, her heart still racing from the board meeting. As she settled into her chair, she felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration pulsating through her veins. The support from Tom had sparked a flame, yet the lessons of doubt and fear felt all too familiar. She had weathered storms before, but this was different. This time, she was stepping into territory laden with expectations and precarity. Staring at her computer screen, Emily realized the clarity of purpose she had felt earlier threatened to slip away. The tension within her was palpable, a tight knot that insisted she confront the deeper challenges ahead. She knew she could not allow the uncertainties of yesterday to cloud her vision today. Determination surged as she began drafting new documents, outlining the specific metrics Tom had suggested, weaving them seamlessly with her emotional narratives. Each word held weight as she crafted her ideas with precision. She was no longer merely sharing her vision, she was building a compelling case that could withstand scrutiny, a narrative fortified by numbers that breathed life into her passion for social impact. Every flick of her fingers over the keyboard brought confidence rushing back, tightening her grip on the reality that she was not alone. However, lurking within the confines of her mind was the fear of Mr. Harrington's next blow. His skepticism had rattled her, and she knew, without a doubt, the next meeting would be a gauntlet where she would have to defend not just her ideas, but her very identity woven into them. The raw fear had become a catalyst for growth, compelling her to visualize her success against the backdrop of opposition. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through her office window, illuminating her workspace, Emily recalled her early days, her struggles as a newcomer desperate for validation. How easily she could back down when challenges arose. Instead of retreating, she had chosen to step forward, redefining her narrative. Each trial had shaped her, and now, surrounded by an unforgiving corporate structure, she recognized that her growth hinged upon confronting her past and defying the echoes of self-doubt. Convinced this would not be a solitary journey, she reached out to Sarah, her mentor, who had stood by her through many rounds of doubt. "Can we meet?" she texted, her fingers trembling slightly as they pressed the send button. Sarah had been the embodiment of resilience in moments when Emily questioned her path. A few minutes later, the reply came, "Absolutely. I'll be in soon." Time slipped by like water through her fingers during their meeting. Emily recounted the details of the board discussion, the pointed questions from Mr. Harrington, and the tentative support from Tom. As Sarah listened intently, Emily found clarity amidst the swirling chaos of her thoughts. "You have to showcase your vision unapologetically," Sarah advised, her voice steady yet passionate. "The most powerful ideas emerge when risks are taken. Lean into that doubt, use it as fuel, not a hindrance." Sitting across from her, Emily felt the weight of her mentor's words sink in deeply, opening doors to a realization. She was on the brink of a revelation. Her success was intrinsically tied to her ability to embrace this confrontation, to let it mold her into a leader capable of merging emotion with analytics in a way that had never been approached in her company before. As they parted ways, with renewed resolve propelling her forward, Emily vowed to seize the upcoming meeting as a stage to debut a more robust version of herself, aptly sculpted by her fears and aspirations. The tension she once thought would infringe upon her voice now converted into a rallying call for her inner fortitude. But as she prepared for the day ahead, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if Mr. Harrington's challenge was only testing how far she was willing to go to protect her vision? The next meeting loomed, an arena brimming with potential, and uncertainty swirled like a tempest. Would she emerge stronger, or would she dissolve under the pressure? Emily Sullivan stood outside the boardroom, her heart pounding in a rhythm that seemed to echo the weight of her ambitions. This was the moment she had been preparing for, a convergence of her personal growth and professional aspirations where she could ultimately prove her worth. No longer merely the 12-year-old girl who penned a desperate letter, she was now an articulate advocate for empathy-driven transformation within corporate decisions. As she stepped inside, every face around the oval table captured her attention. Mr. Harrington sat at the helm, his expression unreadable, but there was a hint of curiosity beneath the seriousness. This was it. Time to showcase not just the stories but her compelling call to action, a fusion of narratives and actionable insights that could redefine their approach to corporate responsibility. "Thank you for gathering again," she began, every syllable carefully measured, carrying the weight of her meticulously crafted presentation. Emily folded her hands, summoning an inner steadiness that quieted her racing thoughts. "Today, we'll focus on how integrating human narratives into our strategy can yield measurable results." As she unfolded each slide, she presented the data entwined with impactful stories, examples of lives transformed and communities uplifted through initiatives the company had spearheaded. Quotes from residents at the shelter illustrated the stark contrast between numbers on a balance sheet and the real-world impact those figures represented. With each point she made, Emily's confidence blossomed. Mr. Harrington nodded once, signaling contemplation rather than dismissal, and with every forthcoming discussion, her allies began to emerge. Tom's skepticism softened as he connected with the data's emotional resonance. Yet, amidst her triumph, Mr. Harrington leaned forward. Empathy is compelling, Emily, but how do you quantify this? It remains a gamble. A wave of conviction surged through her. It's not a gamble, it's a strategy. With concrete metrics to evaluate engagement and public response, we can validate the returns on our commitment to communities. The air in the boardroom thickened, threading her resolve with anticipation. Her presentation transformed into a dialogue of ideas, where the uncertainty that had once gripped her now sparked fierce exchanges of strategy. Tom, emboldened by her passion, contributed data that showcased potential increases in customer loyalty tied directly to reputation management results they had observed from similar initiatives. Weeks of doubt and solitude vanished in these moments of collaboration and support. They were becoming a united front against skepticism. As they delved deeper, Emily became acutely aware of the paradigm shift at play. She had unearthed not just a plan but a vision that encompassed a legacy of change, one that transcended mere profits. Let us frame our narrative around the successes, she declared, conviction infused in her tone as she glanced from face to face. She could feel the growing momentum, the convergence of their disparate perspectives colliding into a meaningful conversation. When we frame our goals around empathy and meaningful impact, we exceed expectations. The digital clock ticked persistently in the silence. Then, in an unexpected move, Mr. Harrington broke the tension. If you can present this at the next shareholder meeting with actionable insights, then you may have a case worth pursuing. The challenge hung in the air, a looming promise igniting the fire already burning within her. Emily took a deep breath, absorbing how far she had come from the trembling hands that wrote letters of desperation, to commanding a room full of decision-makers with fortified resolve. She realized that she was no longer a shadow lost in fear, she was proactively shaping her fate. As discussions wrapped up, excitement buzzed in the air. Emily locked eyes with Tom, his expression inspiring confidence. Let us skewer the details, share our story in a way that it captivates. We can do this. Weeks later, as she stood before investors at the shareholder meeting, the weight of her evolution crystallized into determination. Her carefully curated presentation showcased a synthesis of powerful narratives interwoven with data proof that exploring the human experience could indeed drive revenue and loyalty. The audience seemed captivated, faces leaning in as she unveiled not just figures, but connections with individuals whose lives had been touched. The moment of truth arrived the following week. Emily received an email that would change everything, a unanimous decision from the board to implement her strategy. With a heart full of grateful resolution, she realized her impossible transformation had not solely authored a new chapter for herself, but had also activated a legacy that could shape countless lives. With each step toward the future, Emily embraced the profound fulfillment that had come from her relentless pursuit. Every fear that had once stunted her confidence had now been dismantled. What lay ahead was a world where her voice mattered and where personal stories could proliferate change. This was the culmination of her growth, her emergence as a leader rooted in compassion and strategy, an unwavering belief in the change she could catalyze. The experience had fortified her sense of self, and in that result, she felt a satisfaction only achieved through purposeful effort. Now she prepared to extend that same sense of urgency to her audience. You need to subscribe now to the channel, as this is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Leave a like now to help us feed the algorithm. Comment below your reactions and theories about this ending, as only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.